it is difficult, impossible to sell a genocide. There is no PR company that can sell a genocide to the world, and we are seeing that. And we are seeing more and more people who you'd think wouldn't are now supporting this side that are describing what Israel is doing as a genocide, like Olmert and so many others. So just get your thoughts on the fact that there is, as Nazrin Malik mentioned, that the way we talk about Israel has changed, but there isn't really anything effective being done. An example of that is David Lammy, the UK Foreign Secretary. He announced when the statement was issued, joint statement, that trade negotiations with Israel will be suspended. But as he tweeted that, Ian Austin, who is a UK's trade envoy to Israel, he tweeted that he is in Israel meeting with business leaders, and they are discussing promoting trade between the UK and Israel. So within seconds of Lammy saying what he said, condemning Israel and whatnot, the UK trade envoy to Israel undermines him by tweeting something out, saying that he's in Israel discussing with firms and Israeli companies. So I guess Nazrin's title of her article is very astute and honest.
Well, it's right on target, and Nasreen Malik's recent Guardian opinion piece, and she's written so many outstanding ones. This is undoubtedly one of the best, particularly because it turns out, I think it was published the day before we found out, if I can put it in polite French, that David Lammy was full of shit and knowingly lying to Parliament about suspending these trade talks. You know, the credibility of British officials going back centuries for that matter, and regarding Palestine, certainly from the moment Great Britain first got involved in the Palestine question, their credibility is as bad, if not, if this can be even possible, worse than that of Israeli officials. It's, you know, they couldn't transparently tell the truth if their lives depended on it. Now, regarding Ehud Olmert, excuse me, I think it's a very interesting case. Olmert, as you may know, was the Israeli Prime Minister in 2008 during Operation Cast Lead, the first major Israeli onslaught on the Gaza Strip after Israel's 2005 disengagement from the territory. And of course, was an attack replete with war crimes and crimes against humanity that were all detailed in an excruciating manner in the well-known Goldstone report, which still stands, even though its author, Richard Goldstone, tried to pretend that none of what he said was true, but it's just overwhelmingly documented. And he has now come out and stated that Israel is not only perpetrating war crimes in the Gaza Strip, but is engaged in a war of extermination or war of annihilation. I'm not sure which phrase he used. My understanding is that he wrote this for the Hebrew edition of Haaretz, but this article, or at least a version of it, is now also available on the website of the English language edition of that Israeli newspaper. And a few days previously, we had a statement by an Israeli opposition leader, Yair Golan, pointing out, as others have over decades, that Israel is killing children as a hobby. He should know he was formerly a senior Israeli general and presumably engaged happily in this hobby himself during his years of service. And I think these statements are important. You know, some people would like to dismiss them because they're being made by war criminals, because we don't need Israeli validation to know what's been staring us in the face and all the rest of it. Well, all of that may be true, but at the same time, when people from inside the Israeli elite began parroting what has been, as you noted, been obvious for a year, and what every major human rights organization and genocide specialist and so on has been saying, I think it's politically significant. Perhaps not for you and me, but when you look at these cowardly politicians and officials who have been trying to look the other way for the past 18 months while sending arms to Israel and so on, it makes it more difficult for them to sustain their position. And if they're sitting on the fence, it makes it a little easier for them to come out and begin stating the obvious. The situation we have here is that is European officials in particular are now being caught between the hammer of increasingly large demonstrations by their own citizens. We had massive ones in the past week in Amsterdam and London and elsewhere. Um, they're caught between the hammer of the growing schism between official policy and public opinion on the one hand, and the anvil of this constant stream of increasingly genocidal statements by the most senior Israeli leaders. And it's making it impossible for them to continue with business as usual, or at least making it more difficult for them to continue with business as usual. And then when you have Israeli leaders like Olmert and Golan, who enjoy more respect with many of these officials than the crew currently in charge of the Israeli government, I think that can be politically significant, and I think it should be mobilized to generate further pressure on these Western governments.